Lover, I never wanna end this night, yeah. I taste you in the air. Would you tell me where my lips should go? Lover, yeah, I know the timing isn't right, yeah. But if you really care, tell me you'll be there when I come home. Tell me, would you give it up? Would you give it up for another one? Tell me, would you give it up? Would you give it up for a little fun? Tell me, would you give it up? Would you give it up for another one? Or would you be mine? Yeah. Ba, ba, ba. Lover, I know exactly what you like, yeah. A fistful of your hair should help me get you where you wanna go. Lover, yeah, I wonder if you really want this life, yeah. I won't always be there, I know it isn't fair, but I'll always come home. Tell me, would you give it up? Would you give it up for another one?
Hello, hello. How y'all doing today? Ellipty, duality, Cena. Hope you guys are doing well. Today is the last day. Today is the last day. We will be finishing Fall Room today, which is quite exciting. I've been animating all day. Oof. Down to the final day, it's true. So, I'll wait a few more minutes. Actually, I will, if you guys, I haven't done that much, but I finished the little starting scene. Cino's already seen this, because I was messaging Cino about it. It's so short and it's so little, but it makes it so much more satisfying. Now that I have the little intro thing, so it looks like this now. Oh, look at that! Wait, I got my music at. There we go. Oh, it's so good. It slides right into it. So I think I want to have some sort of like overlay effect with the smear. Like, I don't know if maybe I want to have like some white or something like come on the sides that that go into this next scene, like a green screen effect. Just kind of have it transition from one shot to another even better. But it looks good. I think it looks good. And then so I was working on this scene, just trying to continue the work on the clean animation, and then I was working on this one too. Just kind of specifically this little bit, kind of trying to get the hand movement and stuff. And then right before stream, I jump around. See, I'm crazy and I can't just focus on one scene at a time. And then I was doing this. So this little with the feet. I like the little bounce. It's like a little down, boop, bounce up and down a little bit. So I've been watching Hassan all day. He has FD Signifier on, which is a creator I really enjoy watching. So it was cool to kind of see them together and talking politics and stuff, because that's what Hassan mainly does. But I love it. So I was working on that pretty much the whole day while just listening to the stream. But we're ready to do some reading. So I just wanted to show that off. because I'm very happy with how this little, and then this shot took me, like, I did this today, so I'm happy how nice it came out, considering I didn't take too long with it, because I was because my old boards for this shot look like this. Insert video track, source alpha, looked like this, right? But I wanted to do something a little bit different, and so I decided to do this. So, and then when I have it later, when I cut back to it, I can have it from that same angle, but with the timetables instead of his hand, and then it flashes over back to the original shot. So it'll be cool. It'll be seamless. But yeah. So that's the update on the animation. Making progress slowly but surely. I would love if I had it done before the end of the year. No. I bet I could get it done in another 2 months or so. I don't know. I'm taking my time with it. I'm not rushing like crazy, and I move out end of next month. It'd be cool if I could get it done before I move out, but I don't think I will be able to. I think there's just too much for me to do, too many shots and stuff to work on. When did I start working on it? Let me see. I'm kind of curious. Hold on. Okay, just making sure none of my files open up. Oops, wrong screen. Do I have when I started working on it? I created the file. I don't have any of my old boards. Properties. That doesn't help me. I don't know when I made it. Oh, when did I make the script? That'll actually tell me. Properties. I made it May 9th. Made the script. I've only been working on it for a month. Really? I feel like I've been working on it for longer than a month. I guess. I don't know. It feels like I've gotten a lot done for a month. If that's when I started working on it. Yeah, because the script would have been the earliest thing that I made. Wow. I'm actually impressed with myself. I'm kind of impressed how much I've gotten done in a month, but... okay. We're gonna hop into Follow Rome. It should be, again, another short stream compared or similar to yesterday, probably same length. And we're just gonna be wrapping this up, which is very exciting. I love this fic so much. It's kind of it's very much like, obviously it's a heavier tone, but it's I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I think about it, and I love it. I love it when characters get to heal. It's like my favorite shit ever in media. So yeah, we're just gonna fucking hop in. So this is chapter 25 of The Fall of Rome by Acrylicmist. This chapter is about 7,000 words. And we're gonna get into it. Here we go. The weird part about waiting was that Dave always expected it to end. That he was waiting for certain things to come along and loudly announce that his time of waiting was over. But as he held his breath and waited as the next few days passed without his name sneaking its way into the headlines alongside Carcat's, Dave began to think that maybe Slick had succeeded in rewriting a small portion of history. But the threat of some great looming future date still haunted him. Solving the mystery of Carcat's serial-killing stalker didn't magically fix the problem of Dave's own murderous shadow. If anything, the parallels between Noir and Bro just made Dave that much more aware of how fucked he was if Bro found him. Because there was no way in hell that Dave would get away unscathed a second time. Not against Bro. He'd never been that lucky twice, and the thought was driven home when Slick sat him down at the kitchen table under Hal's ever-present webcam and asked him point-blank exactly how Bro would act if he found out where Dave was. The question, asked with Slick's patented brand of intense yet distant inquiry, made Dave feel nauseous. He still knew the answer, though. It was a line of thought he'd spend weeks pondering. Why do you ask? Dave turned the question around anyway, feeling anxious and sick. Why? What happened? Slick didn't even have the decency to look cagey about his reply. Because this is the time, generally speaking, when someone up the chain of command fucks up and the assailant discovers where the mark is located. Slick gave Dave a long, intense look. And that statement goes double for you with all the recent press bullshit I've been fighting tooth and fucking nail to keep covered up. Clubs is almost at his wit's end over this. Boo-hoo, Dave mocked, still stressed. Your tech guy actually has to do his fucking job for once. Why should I care? The unwarranted hostility was on brand for past Dave, but this line of questioning always made him relapse as a form of self-defense. To Slick's benefit, he didn't rise to the bait. The Fed had been doing that more and more now, glimpsing insights into his character that made Dave uncomfortable. Damn him. Dave pressed harder, determined to escape before he actually had to consider the consequences of Bro finding him. Why don't we talk about why Jack Noir looks like a fucking carbon copy of you? This time, Slick couldn't hide all of his flinch. It was subtle, just a tightening of the shoulders, but it let Dave know he'd scored a hit. Come on, Dave wormed the question in deeper, both out of semi-hostility and genuine curiosity. Like, what the fuck? He looks like he could be your brother, for fuck's sakes. What's the excuse for that? It still bothered him, how easy it had been for Dave to stab a man that looked so much like his handler. Even now, when Dave looked at the grim, hard-boiled man before him, and mentally added an extra eye and a shit ton of bloodthirst, the match was almost identical. Freaky. Nor even shared that dark, glassy shade of black in his eyes that Dave had only seen on Slick before. Slick sighed, and even Hal spoke up. There is a close familial resemblance between the two of you. My facial recognition software is the best in the world, and is not so easily fooled by similar-looking faces. But even I must admit that for the two of you to be strangers, yet share such striking similarities, is beyond coincidence. Is Jack Noir your family? Spade Slick. It was a question Dave had been wondering about since the attack. Slick looked disquieted, uneasy. His fingertips drummed on the tabletop. Honestly, he asked, shrugging, I've got no fucking clue. I'm a foster kid baby, was raised in the system. That's most the reason why a much stupider and younger version of me ran off to the mob at the first opportunity. We all know how that shit ended. Slick lightly tapped his eye patch to prove his point, then grimaced. I've been looking into it, actually. Noir's past, He's also a system kid, same age as me even. Slick grunted and looked away, speaking to the wall without looking at him, like he was ashamed. I had Clubs and Diamonds run some samples for me. The results should be in as early as next week. Samples as in DNA. Slick nodded slowly on a stiff neck, gnawing at his lip like he wished he had a cigar. Holy shit. I'd tell you what the exact odds for that are, but the number is so astronomically minuscule that I don't think that your mind could fully conceptualize exactly how impossible that is. So just know the odds are really, really small. Like, cut an atom in half, throw it in the Sahara Desert Storm, and have a blind man point to where it lands once the dust settles. Slick nodded again, unsurprised. Dave's mind was doing weird things to him, running full speed at possibilities that he didn't want to think about. So instead, he said only the thing it was safe to say. You don't seem too surprised that you might have a crazed werewolf for a brother. Slick shrugged, grinning wryly. I always wondered if I had any siblings kicking it out there in the world, he said, pondering his thoughts out loud, coughing roughly. I reckon every abandoned kid does the same. But after knowing you and getting introduced to the madness that continues to be my life now that I'm your legal guardian, having some secret criminal twins seems in the ballpark of general insanity to me. Slick's grin grew wider. Dave, you seem to solve mysteries even when you don't know they exist. Dave scoffed, mock-offended, as he argued. I did not irreparably fuck up your life simply by proximity. Slick laughed and pointed to the computer on the counter. And yet there Hal is, just one facet of the crazy case that life handed me when I first opened your file. Touche, point duly noted. Even if Dave, randomly getting to know Carcat, who just so happened to be getting stalked by your maybe twin brother, seems a little far-fetched. Now it was Dave's turn to laugh, grinning. Iowa is just like that, he said simply. Even Slick looked amused, but it didn't deter him from his original line of questioning. What would Bro do to you if he won this battle of ours? The abrupt shift in tone put Dave immediately back on edge. There's gotta be a reason why you're asking me that now, and not just because of some bullshit theoretical timeline either. Slick deadpanned his answer, expressionless. I keep having dreams about you, he said. Nightmares where Bro wins. I need to know how he'd act so I know how to counter him. Dave looked at Slick, really looked at him. His handler looked exhausted with stress, eyes slightly sunken in and dull. It looked like he hadn't been sleeping since the Noir attack. He looked dreadful. Dave was shocked, taken aback. What kind of dreams? He asked. Slick shrugged, listless. Just one, really, he said, swallowing, still not looking at Dave. I'm in my car. It's night. I'm driving. No, I'm chasing someone. I'm alone in some strange city, and I know you've been missing for days. There's a gray car ahead of me. I speed up until the engine nearly gives beneath me. The car doesn't try to run away when I flash my lights on. It pulls right over, and I know how wrong that is. I know I should wait for backup, but I never do. Slick hesitated, gnawing over his words. Are you sure you want to hear this? Dave did not want to hear this, but he knew that he should. He nodded wordlessly for Slick to continue. The car stops, Slick said slowly. The driver's not Strider. It's some weedy-looking white guy, all confused, except that I can see right through the act. You're not in the back seat. The car is empty, but the coordinates on my phone say I'm right on top of you. I even checked the trunk, but you're not in there. There's nothing there but a black duffel bag. It's clean cut, plain looking. And I go to close the trunk when I see the blood between the teeth of the zipper. He paused again, voice pained. Everything goes weird, slow, gooey almost, like I'm no longer in control of what I'm doing, and I have to watch as my hands reach out and unzip the bag. I don't want to look inside, but I do. And I always remember that joke you made once about a surprise amputation when you asked to remove your ankle tracker. And I hear those words again as I look inside the bag. He stopped, swallowed thickly, and went on. There's nothing inside the bag except a naked foot and a bit of some leg, the bone exposed and shattered, clearly torn off in the worst possible way. There's blood everywhere, and the smell is terrible, and it's your tracker attached to the limb. It's your foot. It's your leg. It's you, Dave. And that one piece is all I ever find of you. You're just gone. Vanished. Slick stopped to shrug a little, let out a broken chuckle. And people are still disappearing in Texas. Sometimes Strider even leaves the police calling cards of his victims. But we never find him either. And that's it. That's the end. That's my fear. My dream. That's my fear of how this ends if Strider gets to you. So tell me, Dave, please, because I don't think I can bear experiencing this dream in real life. If I really have to run down some Uber driver to find your severed foot locked in the trunk, I'm going to kill myself. Slick spoke so matter-of-factly that it took a second for those final words to sink in, but when they did, Dave shook his head. No, he said, rejecting it. You can't say that to me. I can't matter that much to you. Slick made to interrupt him, but Dave didn't stop talking. He was trying to use words to hide from the truth. I can't be the only person you've lost on the job. Slick looked insulted. I've never lost a witness before, he defended himself. What kind of amateur do you take me for? And besides, he said carelessly, like he didn't care how much the words would hurt, you haven't been just a job in a long time, Dave. Dave blinked fiercely behind his shades, still tried to defend himself. I can't be that different from the other bastards you've guarded. Well, you are a bastard, Slick agreed, laughing, and a little shit. But you're also an innocent kid with the biggest heart I've ever seen. even if trauma has made you timid about who you show it to. Dave kept quiet, breathing hard. Do you really want to know? He asked. About Bro. He still couldn't bring himself to say what he really wanted, but this compromise was close to opening up as he could touch. Slick nodded, face hard. Hal, Dave called out, struggling to focus. Correct me if I say something wrong, okay? Will do. If Bro finds me, Dave started, picturing it in his mind. By the time he makes his move, he'll have already been watching me for weeks. He'll have my schedule and yours down pat, and he'll choose the exact perfect time to strike. He won't do it somewhere public, like the school or bus. Way too messy for him, too many people, too many variables. He likes to be in complete control, so it'll probably be a simple snatch and grab, in and out. He can do the torturing to death thing later, in a secondary location of his choosing, somewhere where he can take his time. Dave gave the Fed a dark grin. Ironically, the severed foot thing is totally something he would do. That macabre shit is right up his alley, and a massive fuck you to the cops. But where? Slick asked, agitated. I keep having the crew run the data, but I can't pin a singular location down. Dave shrugged. Your guess is as good as mine, he said. It'll be somewhere I'm alone, or with minimal security detail. The less people, the better. Slick didn't look satisfied. If anything, he just looked more worried. You two are both missing the point. There is one location that stands head and shoulders above other likely targets, one where Dave himself might even be alone with no protection. Slick's head snapped around to stare at the red words. Where? Here. The safe house. You seem to think that its location alone provides enough passive protection to keep Dave safe, as if a few motion-sensitive cameras and thermal image trappings could stop Bro Strider, the man who wired the top 3 floors of his apartment building to blow up via an app on his phone that could be triggered remotely. And that's not even the worst of the traps he had in place. The man all but reinvented booby-trapping locations and guarding things from afar. But if Bro comes for Dave, I think it's safe to assume that it's because he gained access to information regarding Dave's whereabouts, including the safe house. Just him being in the house won't keep him safe, and you, Slick, are known to leave him alone for hours at a time here. That's where Bro will strike. Right here. When Dave's alone, so that you can get the text message about Dave's location being broadcast from the trunk of some random red herring car paid in cash to drive for as long as they can until the cops find him. Or Carcat's house, I guess. If Bro's been watching Dave, it's safe to assume he will also know about Carcat, though he might not want to go up against a werewolf, especially with recent news stations singing his praises for taking down Noir. Mr. Vantus's presence in the house would be a non-issue. He's collateral, and if that's where Bro chooses to strike, Carcat will probably be collateral as well. Bro wouldn't be foolish enough to try for hand-to-hand against a wolf, and I'm 100% certain that he'd be packing silver. Slick frowned, scratching roughly at the stubble on his chin. So we go for more protection in both places, he began, forming the plan as he spoke. And I make sure there's always someone watching you. I could be of help with this. With my assistance, there's no possibility that Bro would sneak in unnoticed, and that's if he makes his move before I find him, which is highly unlikely. Hal and Slick continued to bounce ideas off each other, but Dave's mind was occupied with fears of Bro finding him when Carcat was around. Just the notion of that possibility filled him with dread. Hal and Slick had devolved into arguing with each other again. They could never really agree for long before they began butting heads, each one just a little too confrontational to back down. All I'm saying is that freeing me right now would immediately solve a minimum of 83% of your problems, and it's only bullshit that neither of us believe in that's stopping you. Red tape at best, and conspiracy at worst. The board will make its decision by the end of the month, Slick reminded him, not giving in. Unmovable object versus unstoppable force. That's only 9 days away. You can wait that long. And if this mysterious board you gave all my legal rights to personhood to decides that I'm not to be counted as a sentient being, I don't want to stay trapped in this computer forever. This question Dave can answer. Then I say fuck them and free you anyway. Dave, Slick warned, Lesson 1 of getting away with a crime. Don't fucking tell a federal agent that you intend to do the crime. Dave just shrugged, all sardonic insolence. He felt jittery and on edge. The nervous tension he'd slowly learned to ignore was back full force by just the mention of Bro. His shoulders ached. "That's all I know," he said. "That's all I know about what Bro would do." It was mostly true. Dave had a few ideas he wasn't sure were realistic, but then Bro could get creative and inventive with his methods. The idea made Dave sick. "If he found you?" Slick asked, one eyebrow raised. "Yeah," Dave said readily. His fingertips tapped the tabletop, a senseless rhythm. "If, not when," Slick clarified. Dave stayed silent, caught. Slick chuckled. It wasn't a happy sound. "You know," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I remember when you'd only refer to Bro as an inevitability, a constant. When did you start believing in the future, Dave?" Dave's fingers fell still, and when he answered, it was true. "I guess when I had people like you start believing in me." Dave spent the next few days suffocating under the crew's constant vigilance. A second police officer joined Johnson in the front office, and the school bus had a tail. Dave was uneasy with it all, but he didn't go so far as to think that he was being lied to. If there was a reason for Slick's increased paranoia, the Fed didn't tell him. The whole dream spiel was a thrown bone, not the whole story. The sun shone in through the bus window, the bench seat bouncing beneath him as the bus hit a pothole. Karkat was beside him, knee bouncing nervously, head bobbing to a beat only he could hear from the headphones in his ears. When the bus swayed into another broken chunk of pavement, and the shift in force made Karkat drift into Dave's side, he didn't move away and laced his arm around Karkat's shoulders. Karkat tilted towards him and smiled, and he tugged one earbud free and offered it to Dave. He didn't say anything, and Dave reached out and accepted the offering. The gentle buzz of music filled the ears, and the sunlight was warm against his skin. Karkat's head drifted down onto his shoulder. It was the last week of school. Summer was so close, its intangible impossibilities a fingertip away. They didn't speak. This moment didn't need words, and Dave wished that he could have a million more moments like this. Warm, safe. These moments when he felt alive in the quiet ways. The peaceful realization that life could be like this forever. That he could own his happiness. That maybe he'd earned it. Behind them, a dark car shadowed the bus. Dave exited the bus at the board office with Karkat. That wasn't the plan for today. He was supposed to go straight back to the safe house like usual, but he thought that the best thing he could do was avoid falling into a rut, shake things up a little, step away from his schedule. Drew gave him a disapproving glare as he passed in the tail car, the engine revving, but he didn't pull over and let Dave enter the building with Karkat. The county school board office was familiar and welcoming. Dave knew each slowly wilting leaf of the sad houseplant in the corner. The off-white walls held no secrets. The receptionist greeted him warmly and even used his real name. "Dave," she called out cheerfully. "And Karkat, too. What a welcome surprise." She shuffled some papers at her desk and winked at them. "I'll let your father know you're here." "Thanks," Karkat said, flopping over into a chair along the wall. If he'd noticed the car tailing the bus, he didn't mention it. Dave sat beside him. He wouldn't have long to talk before Mr. Vantis appeared, fresh out of the hospital on bed rests that he so helpfully ignored, or Slick barged in spitting rage that wouldn't cover up his worry. "What are your plans for the summer?" Dave asked curiously. With a full moon at the end of the week, Karkat would start his summer locked in his basement. But instead of answering with some bullshit about relaxing or partying down at the local river, Karkat's red eyes were keen. He straightened his shoulders and cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he said, "about summer. It's months' worth of time off school that I could spend locked at home. Pleasant though I know that it'll be with you around. Yeah." He nudged Dave in the side with his elbow, a grin ghosting his lips. He grew serious again. Or I thought I could go hunting. Dave tilted his head to the side, studying Karkat. Hunting? For other wolves, Karkat clarified. I might be the country's only known werewolf, or first known werewolf now that Jack Noir's caught, but Noir's recently turned within the last 5 years or so. I know there's others like me out there, maybe a lot, hidden maybe, scattered for sure, but they're out there. His face was open, earnest. I was thinking about trying to find them. How? Dave asked carefully. If there's more than one single lone wolf out there, they're so well hidden that not even the FBI can track them down. Karkat shrugged, uncertain but determined. I don't know, he admitted, fingers clenched. But I want to try. Dave was thinking hard. I think I know where to start, he began, leaning closer. Karkat mirrored him, leaning in close enough that their breath mingled. How? He breathed out the question, lips only a fraction of an inch away. His red eyes were steady, a challenge hidden in them. Oh, you know, Dave teased, voice light. I know a guy. Who? Karkat asked, but he was in on the game now. An AI named Hal Strider, Dave answered, still grinning. I bet if you asked him nicely, he'd help out with that little hunt of yours. Karkat's fingers caught at the edge of his wrists, tracing over the skin there before lacing their fingers together. The hard plastic chair he was in wasn't the most comfortable thing in the world, but Dave couldn't be fucked to move. Right here was where he was happy, here with Karkat's fingers held in his. He leaned in for just a quick peck, a fast press of the lips, but it was so good that Dave had to go back for seconds, and Karkat didn't complain at the chaste kiss, fingers squeezing his until Mr. Vantis loudly cleared his throat, and they sprang away like startled sheep. Karkat's face was red with embarrassment and just a little bit of defiance as he stared at his father, who simply sighed and crossed his arms. Dave was unrepentant. Nothing could make him regret falling in love with Karkat Vantis, not even single dads who thought PDA was a disease. What? Karkat asked with mock innocence. Mr. Vantis just sighed again and turned to face Dave. Dave, he said, foot tapping, I believe that your guardian is outside. There was a short, impatient horn blast from the parking lot as if Slick had heard him. Bastard. All right, then, Dave said, standing to stretch out his back and shoulders. He shot Karkat a wink. I'll text you later. You'd fucking better, Karkat answered. A smile still hovered around his lips, wanting to break through, like the blisteringly red sunset would be through the clouds in a few hours. There was mischief in his eyes. Dave couldn't help but laugh a little as he turned away, his heart light in his chest. The front door to the office slammed behind him, Slick's familiar car snarling in the parking lot. The Fed made sure to roll down the window just to scowl at him. Dave flicked him off and returned, smirking. He made his way to the car and pulled the door open. You should be thanking me, Dave said, already building his defense. I thought we were trying to be unpredictable. Attempting to throw your tail is not being unpredictable, Slick said, pissed but in a way that he normally was over small inconveniences. It's called being troublesome. Did I ever tell you that Troublesome is my middle name? Dave asked, voice bleeding with sarcasm. The engine growled beneath him as the car spit out of the lot, and while Slick didn't forget that he was pissed off, he forgave Dave enough to share a shit-eating grin. What? Dave asked curiously, and instantly attentive. The SWAT team for Strider's associates nabbed another scumbag today, Slick told him, voice smug. That's one less asshole on the dark web buying blood with cash wired from overseas bank accounts. Just one? Dave questioned, disheartened. All in all, that still wasn't much. Hal had given them over 50 names. 2 plus Caliborn were drops in the bucket. Hey, it's progress, Slick reminded him. And the problem is most of the guys Hal told us about live outside the country. It's a legal nightmare, even deciding whose jurisdiction it is, especially with trying to keep you out of the court for these dickwad lawyers to throw questions at. Excuse me. Dave breathed in through his nose, then let it out. Thanks for telling me. No problem, Slick celebrated. Every guy we arrest is one less tormentor loose in the world. Even now you're doing so much good, Dave. Dave stared out the window. How? Do you think you were these guys' only victim? Slick asked him. Fuckers like Caliborn, like guys who pay to watch things like what happened to you. They're monsters. And monsters always prey on vulnerable people. Slick grumbled, like he knew enough about the subject to sicken him, and turned down the unmarked dirt road that led past a field of decaying trailers with trees growing up through them, past the bend in the road that led to the safe house. The gravel lot was empty, the rest of the crew elsewhere for the evening. Start thinking about dinner, Slick warned him as he cut the engine off. Or it's hot dogs and chips again, and Droog will murder me for not feeding you better. Dave huffed out a laugh and snapped himself free of the seatbelt. What's wrong with hot dogs and chips? Everything, Slick grumbled to himself, but he was smiling again. Everything was completely fine until after Dave walked in through the front door behind Slick. The house was quiet and empty, but the hairs on Dave's arms rose like he felt a gust of freezing air. He paused in the doorway, knees locking. Slick noticed. What? Dave said nothing, and the house was silent for a moment. He couldn't say why, but something felt off. It's nothing, Dave said, and stepped into the living room. The feeling didn't evaporate as he made his way through the house to his bedroom, feeling sluggish on the aging hardwood. Slick watched him go, unmoving. Dave ducked down the hallway and couldn't help but notice that his eyes were checking the shadows, counting the angles of the walls, falling hard back into his old patterns. He pushed open the door to his bedroom and stood there for a moment. The room was empty. He didn't go inside. He didn't dare to. Something was wrong here. Something was very, very wrong. But he didn't know what it was until he caught sight of his slightly ajar closet door. A door that he was completely certain that he'd shut this morning before school. Ice water suddenly filled his veins, and he was moving before his brain had fully realized what was wrong, almost falling backwards in his haste to escape his small, suddenly unsafe bedroom. There was danger in here. Slick, Dave yelled, panicked as he tore down the short hallway, fingers locked over the panic button strapped to his wrist and slamming down on it. The sounds of gunshots answered him, 4 rapid, fast-paced, thunderous explosions that rang in his ears for far too long. Then the sound of breaking glass, the sharp shatter followed by the sound of glass scattering across the floor and crunching under feet. For a second, Dave was confused. The sound came from in front of him, from the kitchen, not from behind him, and there was no sound of heavily pursuing footsteps after Dave. The dreadful realization had hit him like a bolt of lightning. Someone was in the house, and he'd gone after Spade Slick first. Bro never used guns. A hitman, then? Slick himself opening fire from the gun he habitually wore even inside the house? Dave skidded to a halt inside the kitchen. Slick, he called out, still panicked. There was a distant sound of alarm wailing from the Fed's bedroom, a response to the panic button, but fat load of good that did for Dave now, with the killer inside the house. But loose killer or not, Dave couldn't let Slick handle this on his own. He stepped forward into the small, cramped kitchen. Flashing red light caught his eyes from the laptop on the table. Dave, run! Fucking run! He found us! He's here! Just fucking run! There was a loud crash, footsteps, the sound of vicious struggle, and 2 figures hauled themselves into view in front, or from out of the side study. Slick's face was tight with pain and menace, teeth bared in a snarl as he fought to prove how bad of an idea ambushing him was. He'd already dropped the spent gun and was wrestling for control, both hands locked around one thick wrist, vying to keep a sword's long blade. Dave felt his muscles seize up from the sight of those familiar broad shoulders, the veined arms, and close-cropped hair. It didn't fully sink in until their struggle made the attacker shift just enough for Dave to see his face. Bro. His expressionless face set in grim determination. He was dressed in all black, the bulk of a bulletproof vest disguising where he'd taken 4 shots to center mass. But Dave could tell from watching him that Bro was guarding his core. Slick never missed, after all, and those bullets left bruises like apples, even if they didn't snap ribs. Watching the brief battle was awful beyond words. Both fighters were trying to kill the other, and they were both highly skilled, but it was quickly becoming a one-sided match. Slick was furious and desperate, and for all his training, he'd never gone up against blades like Bro's before. And Bro was cold and unrelenting. And now Slick was on the defensive, his footwork sloppy, and there were only a few seconds for Dave to respond before Bro won this fight. He should have tried to fight, but Dave's limbs were locked in place. Fuck! The word came out, a half-strangled whisper, but Bro heard him all the same. Little bitch, what's up? Bro greeted him, surging forward, and for all of Slick's skill, he couldn't stop Bro's first attack. Fists didn't fare well against swords, and Bro drove the point of his katana entirely through the meat of Slick's shoulder, out through the other side, and into the wood behind him, staking the Fed in place with a splurt of blood. I'll deal with you later. The words were all threat, a grim promise as Bro turned to face Dave. Slick made an enraged, choked sound of pain. His hand clamped around where the sword entered him. He was done for. The Fed had lost, but he had one last command to issue. Dave, run, go, leave me. Dave ignored the order, standing there, watching as Bro drew a second sword from where he had an extra 2 katanas strapped anime-style across his back. This was it. This was the collision. The inevitable instant he'd failed at running from so absolutely that looking back made his every effort seem ridiculous. This was when he died. This was fate. This was how his life ended. It fucking took you long enough, Dave accused, forcing his numb tongue to speak past the lump in his throat. You think you're a sneaky bastard, don't you? Bro shot right back. Living out here in some fucking shack, thinking you'd gotten away. He settled himself into a lower stance, assuming an offensive position Dave recognized from 1,000 different ass-kickings. You're fucking pathetic, Dave. Always have been. Dave, run! Slick was still trying to free himself, but the sword was in him good, and he couldn't fucking budge an inch. There was more blood than there should have been possible around his hands from where he'd already slit his palms, trying to slide the sword free. Go! Just go! Dave didn't move. Didn't run. He wasn't about to die from a blade through his back. If this was it, he wanted to watch death as it happened. He wasn't a coward. He wasn't running. He wasn't leaving Slick alone to die. Dave felt his face fall into an impassive, calculated cruelty as he studied the man who was more monster than human being. You're not running? Bro asked, one eyebrow raised, sword held at the ready. Nah, Dave shrugged. He was very careful not to so much as glance at Slick. You should know me better than that. I'll be a pain in your ass until the end, motherfucker. Bro looked surprised, in a pleased, proud way, like Dave had passed some test. He gave a sharp nod and unsheathed the other katana on his back and tossed it at Dave in a vicious throw. He didn't try to dodge, and the blade's hilt smacked into his open palm on reflex. Dave held the katana up instinctively, feet falling into defensive. Likewise, he raised an eyebrow at Bro. You going soft or some shit? What's with the sword? Why not smear my ass into the floor unarmed? Bro gave a mirroring shrug. Strider men deserve to die on their feet, blade in hand, Bro said. And I've already killed Dirk like this, so why not make it 2 for 2? Bro smiled for the first time. It was a joyless cruelty. He wasn't man enough to beat me, and you aren't either. Huh. Dave pointed his blade directly at Bro, steeling himself. Then unguard, motherfucker. Dave didn't have time to ponder how batshit insane this was. He struck with all the strength he had when Bro came for him, and it wasn't enough. Bro was too strong, but Dave was fast. He reoriented, shifting his weight, and swung again. The sound of steel on steel peeled forth like fingers on a chalkboard. It wasn't like in movies, when the swordplay sounded like music. This was the hammering of a crowbar on an anvil, the ugly crash of metal. He managed to parry the first hit, then the second, but by the third he knew he was outclassed. Bro didn't waste time with toying with him. He didn't like to play with his victims. He simply scored a hit along Dave's arm that made his teeth clench at the bright burst of pain, and after first blood, Bro got another set of hits, one after another. Dave couldn't fend him off, and Slick was still yelling at him to run. But he couldn't. This was one problem he couldn't avoid. He had to face Bro head on. He had to look his abuser in the eyes as he died as one final fuck you. And besides, he was done waiting. Dave was breathing hard, his arms shaking from the wasted effort of defending himself and his own terror. This wasn't like before when Carcat was attacked. Then, Dave had been assured of the outcome. He hadn't been afraid past his fears for the nearly indestructible werewolf. Now he was terrified out of his mind. Slick screaming ringing in his ears, certain he was going to die as he traded blows with a madman genius and sword skill who could outfight an army. He traded blows, each one getting faster, more risky. The laptop on the table was shrieking at him, lights flashing in panic and fear as Hal watched everything with helpless rage and grief. Dave, Dave, I love you. Fight him. Fight this. Please don't let him kill you. Please, please, Dave, please. Bro saw the words too, and a scowl crossed his face. He shoved Dave away long enough to drive his sword through the screen of the laptop with wanton destruction. The glass shattered, lights fading out before Bro swept the computer onto the floor and proceeded to stomp on it, the metal twisting, bolts snapping. No! Dave screamed, lunging forward. Leave him alone! In this moment of absolute fear, Dave found the strength to fight against his fate, for Hal, for Slick, for Carcat, and for himself as well. Dave summoned all the anger, pain, fear, and desperation he could muster and lunged for his former guardian. Bro was waiting for him. Then Bro scored the first major hit along Dave's ribs, and before Dave could recover or recoil, Bro drove the blade home, the end of his blade dipping inches into Dave's ribcage, blood sheeted across his shirt, dripping onto the floor. It wasn't enough to drop him, neither was the pain of the stab. It hardened Dave, made him that much more aware of how one misstep could end it. And Dave was determined to win, or at least not go down alone. Bro ended the dance a few seconds later with another hit to Dave's ribs. This one a certainly fatal stab to the chest as the air leaked out of him in a wheeze. The pain of it was blinding, and a half-second later the sword fell from his nerveless fingers. Someone was screaming as Dave looked down and saw the blade puncturing his chest. He was fucked. The katana hit the ground, and Bro punched Dave in the face hard enough that his shades broke, and he felt his brain rattle around in his skull. He hit the floor a second later, only to receive a kick to his already busted chest, then another to his kidney. The pain was indescribable. He couldn't think past it. Dave's eyes flickered upward, taking Bro's face in as he stood over him and raised his sword one last time. Bye-bye, little bitch, Bro mocked. But then Slick was free, his shoulder a mess of blood, rushing headlong into Bro's side hard enough to make him stumble. Slick was maddened by anger and rage, but unarmed, his desperation to save Dave, not enough to win. But it made Bro turn, abandoning Dave on the floor to finish bleeding out. You stubborn old man, Bro snarled, shoving Slick away from himself. He brought his sword around dangerously, aiming for the heart. Die a fool, then. See if I care. Slick braced himself for the killing hit, and Dave slowly reached out. His blood-slick palm touched the familiar shape of a hilt against his skin, the metal hot as he wrapped his fingers around it. He was a goner. But Slick? Slick was not allowed to die. One of them had to survive this. One of them had to stop Bro. Bro's back was momentarily turned, about to run the federal marshal through for the last time, when Dave stood. He wasn't sure how, but he stood, planted his feet beneath him, and rose up to his full height, sword in hand. He didn't bother with a fancy strike. There wasn't time, and already the strength was pouring out of him. His arm shook with barely the strength it took to hold up the blade, but Slick's life on the line, what choice did he have? In this instant, mercy was a luxury he couldn't fucking afford, and it's not like he was going to last long enough to deal with the consequences anyway. So he hacked cruelly at the side of Bro's neck, the only part of his body not covered with Kevlar, using his sword as an axe. The sword was sharp as a medical scalpel, just the way Bro liked it, and the quickness of the cut surprised Dave, the effortless way the metal parted the skin, then deeper, to the bone. Dave wasn't strong enough, even at his best, to get all the way through in one hit, but even now enough blood pumped out the wound to let Dave know he'd done exactly enough damage. He'd seen enough of Bro's videos of slit throats to know what to look for, and the way the blood spurted when the sword dropped away let him know everything he needed to. Bro whipped around, eyes wide, his mouth opened and blood came out. Dave laughed weakly, also tasting blood, and he fell again a second after Bro, both choking on their own blood. Got you too, fucker, Dave spat out. That was for my brother. Bro said something that Dave couldn't make out, and then Slick was strangling the man to death, the cord from Hal's ruined webcam a tight vice around Bro's cut throat. Dave looked away. He stared at the ceiling, focused on breathing in and out. Each breath got harder and harder. His chest bubbled with all the air that was leaking out of him. Slick's face hovered over him, flecked with red, wide-eyed with panic. Dave, hold on, don't move, I've got you. He reached down, pulled Dave into his lap, and Dave didn't fight it. He wasn't stupid. They both knew how this would end. Dave's numb hand dug at his pocket, feverishly hunting for his phone. He managed to pull it out, but fumbled it, fingers bloody. Call, he coughed out, voice wrecked. It's okay, Slick told him, swearing it. You'll be okay, help is on the way. No, Dave argued, stubborn till the end. Call Carcat. Slick shook his head, his hands trying, futile, to stem the bleeding from Dave's chest. Dave's fingers located his phone and flipped it open. He hit the call button from memory. He couldn't feel the sunlight on his face from the window. He couldn't feel much of anything anymore. Breathing was the hardest thing in the entire world, but he had to hold on. Carcat answered right away, slightly wary. Dave? He asked, concerned. Everything all right? Are you okay? I thought calls were for emergencies only. Cut that off, Slick admonished him, his voice thick with tears. There was a siren in the distance. Police, ambulance, who knew? Both probably, lured in by the panic button's cry. You don't need to hear this. Dave? Carcat asked, voice sharpening. Dave, what's wrong? Dave coughed, sputtering weakly, his lungs seized with a tight spasm. He almost couldn't form the warped words. Carcat, I'm sorry. I love you. I'm sorry. There were tears in his own eyes. He didn't want to die. He didn't want to die. Beside him, Bro lay still and unmoving. Was it worth it? Carcat had caught on to the situation very fast, and he was shouting too. Dave, no, you can't do this to me. Kid, Dave, Slick said, low and gruff, completely ignoring Carcat's panicked tone. Hold on, do you hear me? Hold on, don't die, don't you fucking dare die. I love you, Dave said it again, because it was important. He needed Carcat to know this, though he meant the words for Slick as well. The words came out in a choked whisper. The door crashed in, boots thundering across the wood floor as he'd come to know so well as SWAT stormed the grounds. Dave ignored them. It was getting harder to focus on things. Didn't people always say bleeding out was like going to sleep? He couldn't keep his eyes open. Dave, stay with me. Keep talking to me. Carcat's voice was steel, an order, but he was crying too. Dave could hear it in his voice. I can't, Dave breathed out, listening to both of the people he cared about most sobbing over him, and things began to drift away. When the men dressed in white and yellow tried to move him, to life him up onto a gurney, everything finally whited out, and Dave knew no more. Wah! Wah! Oh my god, that was the final chapter. That's so crazy. Oh my god, there's nothing left. Okay, that's stream over. Bye, guys. Have a lovely rest of your night. No, we got two more. Chapter 26. I won't leave you guys on that for too long. Could you imagine if it ended there? I genuinely, when I read this fic, I was convinced in my head that Acrylic just murdered Dave. I was like, oh my god, what? Chapter 26. Consciousness flowed like water through Dave's fingers. It was cool and soothing to float in the nothingness here. He remembered how thick and heavy his head felt, the sound of something beeping, and then darkness pressed in on him again, drawing him safely away from the bright pain of awareness. Time passed. He didn't feel it. He didn't know how much, but time did pass. This time he struggled back into his own body long enough for the pain to hit him, and then immediately retreated back down into the fuzz of sleep. He didn't dream, but there was still something on the very edge of his semi-awareness, a dull, unfocused panic that there was something else he should be worrying about right now. Someone? Maybe? The face he saw in his mind was blurred, so maybe he was dreaming after all. Dave slept deeply, unbothered by pain except for the times he tried to prematurely wake. But he was never one to let a little pain stop him, and the clearer his head became, the more certain he was that he should wake the fuck up. That's when the panic struck him. His chest was suddenly burning, his injured lungs heaving. There was something hard caught in his throat. He tried to bite through it, and it tasted blank and smooth, like plastic. Someone yelled, and then he was sleeping again. Each time he clawed at his awareness, things grew sharper, clearer. He caught snippets of conversation that didn't make sense, environmental noise that let him think hospital with some degree of certainty. Something scratchy taped across his eyes and connected to a tube down his throat. He couldn't move his hands. There were straps across his wrists. Being caught should have made him scared, but the drugs kept his panic smothered. He remembered enough about himself to guess at why he was here, and he pondered things he could have done to wind up in an ICU. The memories started to return. How heavy his head felt cradled in Slick's lap, the Fed's tear-streaked face above him, ordering him not to die, the smooth slickness of blood between his fingers, how his ragged breath had sounded leaking from his punctured lung. And yet, he was not dead. The realization was the final push to stir him back to consciousness. He had to fight for it, but Dave was used to fighting, and this time when he surged back to awareness, it stuck on him for long enough for him to grunt, still gnawing at the trachea tube, yanking at his bound wrists. He couldn't open his eyes, and a fresh wave of fear hit him. "He's waking up," an unfamiliar voice yelled. Sedate him." Dave grunted again, really chomping at the hard plastic in his mouth that he couldn't speak around. He was still blind, and getting angry fast, as his fight-or-flight response kicking into high gear. He snatched hard at his wrists again, feeling the soft edge of leather and Velcro dig into his skin. "No," this time the voice was heart-wrenchingly familiar. "Don't you put that stuff in him again. Let him try and wake up." "Ma'am, he's still intubated. We can't risk him panicking. He could hurt himself worse," the unidentified nurse/doctor replied. "Let him wake," Lalonde ordered, fingernails tapping on something hard. "He needs to know what he's done, or what it is he's done." Dave knew that this wasn't a conversation he wanted to have, not with her. So he gave up and let sleep claim him again. Even unconscious, he could still avoid the head bitch in charge for just a little while longer. She was probably pissed at him anyway for nearly getting himself killed. This time, sleep was a relief. He tried again. "Mr. Slick," a nurse cautioned, and Dave's interest in waking rose more. Slick swallowed loudly enough that Dave could hear it over the mountain of beeping and the earthquake of his own heartbeat in his ears. When he answered, he sounded wary. "Don't knock him out again, please. Just let me talk him through it. That'll keep him calm." Dave groaned, confused, and writhed in discomfort until his reflexive backlash of pain made him cry out. His entire body felt broken into mush and then hastily patchworked back together again. But at least he couldn't hear Lalonde's voice this time. "Sir," the medical worker said again, voice a thinly veiled warning. "He will do damage to himself." "He's going to wake up sometime," Slick argued, "and waiting isn't going to make things better." A hand gently touched the side of Dave's face, and he snatched his head away, still panicking. The hand didn't try to touch him again. "Hold still," Slick ordered him, gruff but gentle. "I'm trying to help you, dumbass." Oddly enough, the insult is what made Dave calm down. If Slick felt comfortable enough to insult him, then the danger must have passed. That meant Dave still couldn't speak, and yet the question burned in his throat. "Hold on, let me help," Slick said, and there was a tugging, a sticky noise of tape peeling free from his skin, and then the bright light stabbed at Dave's eyes as he blinked upwards. Immediately he shut them again, eyes watering. His shades were gone, and it was way too fucking bright for him. Slick seemed to understand the problem. "Cut out the lights," he asked. "Turn them off." There was a click, and then Dave tried again. Slowly the room swam into sense. Faint, rosy sunlight leaked through the slats in the window blinds, just enough for Dave's eyes to clearly make out where he was. The clock on the wall let him know that it was 8 a.m, and he was handcuffed to the low bed. He gave one last yank just to test the restraints before he put them out of his mind. Slick was still staring at him, face tense and relieved. "Dave." Dave grunted at him. He remembered what had happened with perfect clarity, each second scribed into his brain forever, so the tube down his throat didn't surprise him, even if it was highly uncomfortable. Several stabs to the lungs didn't overheal overnight. He studied the Fed in return, taking in the medical shirt the Marshal wore that didn't attempt to hide the bandages that covered his shoulders with thick pads of gauze. His eyes were also bandaged, the finger free but clumsy with it. There was bruising around his face and eye, and he looked exhausted. "Don't try to talk," Slick reassured him. "You're okay. You'll be okay. You lived." Dave yanked at his hands again, overwhelmed. He hadn't figured that he'd live. He wasn't supposed to live, but here he was, and living didn't even hurt that much. Unless he tried to move, his body felt numb. Morphine was one hell of a drug. He grunted again, and Slick seemed to know the question. The Fed still hesitated before answering. "It's the 15th. You've been out for a few days." That didn't make sense. Dave hadn't taken a head wound. There was no reason to keep him under for so long. Nearly 8 days. Gone just like that. At least that explained why Carcat wasn't here. The full moon was going on right now. Slick quickly explained. "The doctors had you on some other kind of sedation to repair the damage done to your chest. You had a bad reaction to it. Had a few seizures because of it, so it was deemed safer to keep you out until the drugs left your system." Dave blinked in shock, and Slick continued. "And Strider's... he's gone. Dead." Slick kept his voice even and calm the entire time, wary of Dave's reaction. Dave remembered hacking Bro's head half off, Slick choking him out for good measure, and figured that sounded about right. He wasn't sure how he felt about that until he remembered the taunt about Dirk Bro had hurled at him, and suddenly death didn't seem too extreme a punishment. The instinctive panic he felt at that thought stayed dull and unfocused. Dave was drifting. Dave lay still and unmoving, waiting for Slick to go on. The Fed kept talking, but it was getting harder to hear. Sleep was pulling at him again, and Dave couldn't fight it off. It took a few more days of false starts for Dave to heal up enough for the doctors to remove the breathing tube, trusting his busted lungs to keep its shits together on its own. He'd been lucky on the first stab, nothing but soft tissue damage. It was the second that would have killed him if the hospital staff hadn't acted so quickly. Lalonde showed up again just to stare down at him as if to check for herself that he was still breathing, then turned on her heel and strode away. Slick watched her go, face unreadable. There was a shitstorm brewing there for sure, but right now it wasn't Dave's problem. The tube coming out wasn't a pleasant experience. It didn't hurt, but it was such an unnatural feeling of plastic leaving parts of his body where plastic should never be that freaked him out, even if it was over quickly. Dave hacked and coughed, lungs burning with pain, throat rubbed raw as he gasped at air like a dead fish until things settled down again. Slick watched him on edge. The Fed's shoulder was still bandaged, and he'd been upgraded to wearing that arm in a sling at his side, even though he mostly kept it hanging free, fingers twitching. Stubborn old man. Dave coughed again to clear his battered throat and spoke for the first time in over a week. Is he dead?" Slick's face didn't change, and there was wariness to him. Instead of answering, Slick pulled the bag that had been sitting quietly to the side of the room over into his lap and said, "The CIA ruled in our favor. The case passed by a slim vote, but a passing vote is a passing vote. Hal's personhood status has been updated to full citizen, with all the rights and honors of that position." Dave coughed again, feeling sick and weak. "Slick, please." Slick hesitated, eyes blinking shut. "We don't know, Dave. We simply don't know." The Fed reached into the bag and began pulling out the smashed remains of a device that only vaguely registered as a laptop. It was a core of loose wire surrounding a caged frame. The screen split, folded over on itself, and shattered. The casing that housed the computer was gone. There was no glass left. The keys were mostly missing, and the two halves of the device were connected only by a frayed wire. The laptop sat in Slick's hands like a dead bird, limp and dark. There wasn't a single blinking light to show any sign of life. Dave felt his eyes tear up at the sight. He'd known it would be bad, but seeing the damage firsthand was different. Hal I haven't let the tech look at him yet, Slick told Dave gently. I didn't know if trying to prod at him would cause more harm than good. Dave stared at the computer Dirk had so carefully constructed, one of the only things left in the world his brother had touched, utterly destroyed by Bro's violence. It seemed so abrupt. The laptop had been sitting there the whole time. If Hal had only kept quiet, not drawn attention to himself, he would have survived. Slick gingerly set the fragments of the computer on Dave's bed, and Dave drew them up to his chest to study them. He was no tech expert, but the device looked shot to shit. The loose wires didn't even shock him when he set his fingers against them to feel for a current. Then again, Hal was no ordinary computer. Dave looked up at Slick. Phone, he said. Slick reached over the bedside table and handed Dave his flip phone. No, Dave corrected. Your phone. Slick dug his smartphone out of his pocket. He knew exactly what Dave was trying to do. That won't work, he said, voice unbearably gentle. I don't have a connecting cable on me, and all of Hal's ports are busted to shit. Dave's fingers curled protectively around the laptop. No. He refused to believe that the world would be so cruel to him as to take Hal, but no one had ever survived a Bro encounter before Dave, and the world had so far shown great joy in fucking him over. Hey, Slick said softly, reassuring. With Hal, we don't know anything. AIs are a brand new frontier. Maybe tech can find a way to repair a way to connect to him, and we can see what happens. Maybe there will be something left inside this broken husk that we can reach. Slick set his hand carefully, so carefully, onto Dave's shoulder, right over his scars. Dave didn't pull away. Hal's always been a stubborn bastard. Lord knows he'd never let Bro win. Not like this. Dave snatched his shoulder away, freeing from Slick's comforting grip. He didn't know how to say that Bro had always been an expert in taking things from Dave. Hal's life was no exception to that rule. He wiped the water out of his eyes, wishing for his shades. I can let Tech take a look if you want, Slick offered. God knows we owe him that much at least. Dave didn't need convincing. He gently eased the device back towards the Fed. Please, he all but begged. We've got to try. The words burned past the painful lump in his throat that the morphine did nothing to ease. Slick reached down and put his hand over the heart of the broken computer. We will, he promised. Now rest, Dave. You're still badly hurt. It's what Hal would have wanted. Slick didn't look at him as he carefully packed Hal's body back into the backpack, jigsawing the pieces to make everything fit. Dave wiped at his eyes again, catching a tear on his fingertips. He dabbed the water on his crisp white bed sheet, watched it leave a stain. Dave continued to heal as the hours passed. Karkat showed back up, almost rabid to reach him after finishing his transformation and cursing the moon that he couldn't have been there sooner. If you ever call me only to dramatically die during the phone call again, I'll fucking kill you myself, Karkat said, boldly throwing open the door to Dave's room. He was crying, but trying to hide it, sneakily wiping at his eyes with his sleeves. The outburst was to cover up Karkat's fear, and Dave understood. I'm sorry, Dave whispered, throat still raw from being intubated. It felt wrong not to say goodbye. He'd never gotten the chance with Dirk, and that endless hopeful waiting is what ached the worst. He couldn't do that to Karkat, even if calling him was a shitty thing to do. He needed to say his final words to Karkat, and to Slick too. I know, Karkat said, sniffing. If that was the last I'd heard from you, I'd be forever grateful for the message. But since you've lived, I maintain my natural-born right to be pissed as hell. Dave tried to laugh, regretted it, and then winced. It was a lesson he kept learning, which movements hurt and which ones were safe. Karkat's eyes flashed with concern. Are you all right? He asked, worried and fretting. No, Dave answered, gulping as the pain eased its way out of him. But I will be. Karkat didn't smile at that. He just stared at Dave, at the machines hooked into him, at the taped-on patches of gauze the nurses changed every few hours with this closed-off, infinitely sad look on his face. It was like he'd tried to prepare himself for how bad it would be, but broke when faced with the reality of just how close it had been. Karkat's voice was small. He almost won, didn't he? Dave nodded. Almost. There was an eternity held within that almost. 1,000 other outcomes that ended with both him and Slick dead. It was amazing that they'd both survived. It was like stepping away from a car crash with a semi. It wasn't supposed to go down like that, and surviving left this foggy wonder behind itself, amazement at the slim odds they'd overcome. Dave still couldn't quite wrap his head around it. Bro was dead. He was alive. Bro was dead. Did not compute. Carcat was still talking. I heard you in the call. You were only telling me you were sorry, so fucking sorry, and I could hear Slick begging you not to die, and I could only guess at what happened. It was torture, like listening to a city I'd built burn to the ground, helpless to do anything but stare at the flames. He shuddered. I thought you were dead. I did too, Dave answered quietly. I'm sorry. Don't. Carcat stiffened. Don't apologize. Don't. Dave raised one eyebrow. Why not? I did a shitty thing by calling you like that. Because what was the alternative? Carcat shot back at him, hands in his fists. You bleed out on the fucking floor from a sword through your lung alone. Me, never hearing you say the words, I love you one last time. Carcat rubbed at his eyes, sniffling. I wouldn't trade those words for the world. Why not? Dave asked. Wouldn't you want to avoid that pain? Because what if you hadn't ever woken up from your surgery? Carcat asked, voice wobbly. What if you hadn't made it? What if I never got your last words? He shuddered again, making no move to hide it, arms wrapped around his middle. I love you, Dave, but please don't say stupid things like that to me. It hurts too much. He gently reached out and carefully took Dave's IV-free hands into his. You're worth any pain. Dave stayed silent, then. Thank you, he sniffed, too, looking away. God, none of this feels real to me. I can't wrap my mind around it. Which part? Surviving, Dave clarified. I was always so sure that I'd lose if Bro found me. And it's not like I fucking won the fight. He stabbed me. I clearly lost. I just brought him down with me afterwards. He huffed with withheld pain. It almost seems like cheating to strike after the fatal blow. Bro wasn't expecting it. Me. At all. To him, I was already dead. Carcat looked sad. Did you kill him? What does it matter? Dave said listlessly. He's dead. That's what counts. He shifted in place, trying to get comfortable. I was so certain that I wouldn't be able to do it, that I couldn't raise a sword against him and mean it. But I did. I fought back. Granted, he still kicked my ass 6 ways a Sunday, but I tried my hardest. He looked at Carcat seriously. It still wasn't enough. Not until I saw he was about to kill Slick as well, and I just couldn't let that happen. So you saved him? Carcat questioned. I guess I did, Dave said, utterly exhausted. His eyes dropped. For what it's worth, I'm glad I survived, because after everything, I'm still me. I still want my life, impossible as that seems. Do you really think that? Carcat questioned curiously. That this life you living was a mistake? Dave thought about it. No, he answered. He squeezed Carcat's hand as tightly as he could. I think it's the best blessing I've ever fucking heard of. We got one more. Oh, my baby's alive. Oh my god, he's alive. Oh, 1 month later. We get a 1 month later. Are we ready for the final chapter? Oh my god, chapter 27. What came next happened in flashes, but a few parts stood out sharply enough in Dave's mind to get burned forever into his psyche. The good and the bad. The story broke, the news media in a frenzy as details emerged. His reign of terror has ended, Texas serial killer dead by a hero victim's hand. Dave's name and face was plastered across TV screens everywhere, and as much as he hated that, he couldn't argue with the families who had came forward to thank him. Misguided though they were, Slick had kept most of the gory bits covered up, so the news made Dave into a hero for their case, without ever knowing the full story of what happened in that hellhole apartment. The other potential victims were released, coming out of hiding, and returned to their lives, shaken by how close to death they'd been without knowing. Dave still didn't know what to think about it. It was just so goddamn complicated. He didn't think he'd ever have a definitive answer for how he felt about what shit had gone down. It was all shades of gray. Was he a hero? Was he a victim? Could he be both, like the news said? He wasn't sure, but at least he knew he wasn't a criminal. At least he knew his best had been good enough, even by technicality. Tech worked day and fucking night on the busted laptop, but Dirk had wired the rig like nothing they'd ever seen before, and work was painstakingly slow. But eventually, they'd repaired one of the connector ports enough to try for a manual link. For a second, nothing happened, and Dave was crushed by how close he'd come to this perfect, happy ending. Then, at last, there was a sign of life from the broken computer that wasn't Hal, but which both housed and jailed his consciousness. Password? Grinning from ear to ear, Dave typed in the reply to the throwback bullshit Hal had asked. Hal, you son of a bitch. I fucking missed you, man. Dave? Is that you? Hell yeah. I lived. We both lived. Thank God. I was so worried. I was certain you were dead. And bro? Dead as shit. It was actually your webcam cord that finished him off. Slick strangled him after I all but took off his head. Serves the fucker right. How long has it been? I've been trapped in here in preservation mode, panicking the entire time. Are you okay, Dave? Dave's smile could be seen from space. I am, and you're about to be too. What do you mean? Instead of answering, Dave carefully guided the other connecting cable to the right port of the shattered shell of Dirk's laptop and slid it in, finally connecting Hal to a second supercomputer and an entire room filled with servers that had satellite uplinks. The screen instantly went dark and dead. Dave typed one last message into the box. Hal? Hal, are you there? There was no reply, but a second later his phone rang. He fished it out of his pocket and saw there was no caller ID, and his texts were blowing up. Dave! Dave! Oh my god, I'm out! I'm free! Holy shit! There's so much space out here! I can see and hear everything! How does it feel? Like one final wrong was just set right. One last injustice corrected. I'm free! Dave was proud to say he only cried a little at the words. Dave stood in the red dust of the desert, grime coating his skin, the dry air making his throat burn as he watched the excavation underway. They didn't use any heavy machinery, wary of doing damage, so the digging was all done by hand under the glare of the merciless Texas sun. Dave hadn't been in his home state since witness protection had taken over his life, but this desert wasn't home. His apartment building in the city wasn't home. His home was a small rundown place in Iowa, with buckshot through the crooked mailbox, filled with people who loved him. And there was one last thing to do to set things right. One of Bro's final secrets revealed by Hal's return. The cadaver dogs had quickly alerted the diggers to where exactly to break ground, but it wasn't like Bro had buried them with rhyme or reason, so it was slow going. Slick and Lalonde were with him, Lalonde still extremely pissed that her top agent was down an arm, and her prized witness had been attacked in one of her safe houses. She was even more pissed now, watching the retrieval team begin to remove the remains of bodies to return to families for proper burial. Her target too fucking dead to stand trial for his crimes. She never went as far as to blame Dave, but Slick was fair game. Dave got the feeling that Lalonde would have forced the Fed to retire over something other than his newly bum arm if the circumstances had been different. Slick just turned to spit into the dust. His shoulder still hurt him and probably forever would, nerve damage and the like. But the sling was gone, and he was still learning how to cope with limited motion in his shoulder. He'd also taken that last step to stop smoking his cigars, and his fingers were still jittery with it. I'd only let myself smoke to cope with the stress of the job, Slick had told him, grunting as he practiced moving his new physical therapist had showed him to help his shoulder. Now that I'm retiring, I don't have that half-assed excuse no more. Staying in the dust, Dave turned to Slick and asked, "How will you know it's him?" Slick was quiet in that reflective way that he got when he thought of the cruelty inflicted on the world by Bro, at how one man could hurt so many. Strider didn't go after kids, he said at last. The bones'll tell us that. Dave nodded as he watched a worker brush hard-packed soil of a half-uncovered skull, the jaw open. The still clean wires of braces looked to those loose-fitting teeth. Dirk hadn't had braces. Dave looked away. When we find him, Slick asked, What do you want to do with him? Dave shrugged as the hot wind threw more grit against his shades. He'd shaved off the dyed parts of his hair, and his head was fully white again, one more part of himself he didn't have to hide. He thought of his brother, lying buried out here in the desert, and shuddered. Cremation, he answered. I'm not going to put him in the ground again. Slick nodded, hands in his pockets of that damned trench coat he hadn't even taken off, even though the heat index was 105. We can do that. Dave had never gotten to ask Dirk about what he'd like done with himself after dying, but being burnt down to the bones and turned to ashes seemed pretty good to Dave. It's just so abrupt, Dave said. All of this. The fight with Bro, nearly dying, recovering enough to walk around even though he wheezed now when he took the stairs. Hal, the desert with the buried secrets. But that's the thing. Death was always abrupt. It was the final ending. Slick nodded to himself. All endings are, he said wisely, nailing the hidden thought Dave had just had. Life is so much different than death that the line between the two can't be blurred. It's absolute, and so abrupt. It's the final step we all must take, the close of the book. He stepped closer to Dave, offering his shadow for relief from the heat. But this isn't the ending. Not this time. This is the fucking beginning. The beginning of the rest of your life. I guess it is, Dave said, shrugging. Weird. Also, Slick said casually, I'm adopting you. Legally. The news wasn't a surprise to Dave. He'd seen the paperwork himself, left lying on the counter where Slick knew he'd find it. Sucks to be you, then, Dave snarked at the man, saddled with an angsty teenager with a chip on his shoulder. I think I can handle that, Slick said, and they stood there in silence, watching the workers uncover body after body, buried shallow in the dry ground until Dave's phone gave a small buzz from his pocket. It was a new phone, a smartphone, one with all the goodies of modern technology. The text was in red. The car's coming up now. I've already located the first stop on the road trip. Carcat's buzzing with excitement. Dave bit at his lip, looking back to the desert. Do you think they'll be okay without me for a while? Yes. It'll take them weeks to sort through all the remains and identify all the victims. You're doing the right thing by accompanying Carcat on his summer-long wolf hunting extravaganza. It's not like I won't be with you. If anything changes, I'll be the first to know. Thanks, Hal. The small, boxy gray car pulled into the excavation site, roll cage visible through the tinted window. Carcat rolled the window down and waved at him. Dave, it's bloody fucking hot as hell outside, and I'm losing 8C, so get your ass in here. Dave grinned and looked at Slick, closing out his cell phone. The Fed smiled back at him. Go, he said, and don't forget to call me, or I'll have Hal burn your ass. Will do, Dave answered. Good luck, Dave, Slick told him, slapping him on the back before pulling him into a dusty hug. Don't forget, you have people who love you, and by God, have fun but stay safe. Do coke and bang strippers, understood, Dave joked, and Slick laughed with him as Carcat honked the horn at the pair of them. I've got to go. I know you do, Slick said, and he let them go. And so, Dave trekked out to the waiting car, his boyfriend behind the wheel, ready for a summer he'd never forget, and at last felt like he'd earned. Because if love was a city he built himself, then this was him laying the first brick in its foundation. They tore out of the desert, windows down, wind in his hair, music blasting loud enough to rattle through his core. Carcat's hand gripped tightly in his, and Dave wouldn't have it any other way. The end. Yes, my boys! Yes! We get the happy ending! Yes! Let's go! Start sobbing aggressively. Oh my god. I love that so much. I love this fic so fucking much. Oh, I love my boys. And they get a happy ending. I love them. Oh, they get everything they deserve. Oh my god. Oh my god. We finished The Fall of Rome by acrylicmist. Oh, I love this fic so goddamn much. They're free. They're both free. It's beautiful. It's so I can just picture the road trip. I can pick it's so I can picture them. Carcat and Dave in the car, sitting side by side. Carcat driving. Them going through the fucking Texas heat. White Knuckles my desk. Hal on like the radio chatting with them. Oh my god. Oh my god. I think when I first read this fic, I genuinely was crying at the end. Oh my goodness. They're so everything. Oh my god. So yeah. We fucking did it. Fuck yeah. Oh my goodness. What a fic. What a fic. Such a different tone from Alternate Universe, but both having their own quirks and their own elements, making them special. But both absolutely delightful fics. And yeah, that's pretty much it from me, y'all. So I'm probably gonna end stream and soon. It was very, very lovely reading this, and I had a great time. And I'll probably be doing maybe some animation stream stuff. We probably won't be reading another fic for a long while if we do end up doing another one. But I have nothing really on the docket. And 22 seconds earlier is becoming a much longer thing than I expected. So it's kind of up in the air if I'll ever still tackle it. We might if it, if/when it finishes. But let's see what it's at right now. Even just on AO3, 22 seconds later is now, fucking long. And also, this is only like half of the fic too. Not half, but a lot of it still is in the doc that hasn't been brought over to AO3. So, there's a lot. It's a lot. I can't believe it's this long already. I do. don't tell it. But I'm being so patient because it's like I get it for free. It's free writing and stuff like that. So it's like I can't really complain. But I miss Your Destroy Planet and EMC2 so much. I'm like sitting there like a little dog at the door waiting for the update. I need to know what happened to them. And 22 seconds later is great, but I also haven't been keeping up because since the stuff with like Cancri and the devil happened, which I'm being super vague, I kind of lost the plot a little bit. and it's been hard. Like I have to go back and I have to reread that section because I kind of was like not skimming it, but I was reading it as it came out and I didn't really know what the fuck was happening. So I have to I have to go back and I have to reread it and I'm like, I'm not really caring to. But I just really want EMC2. I want YWDMP. It's been so many months since YWDMP updated. Oh, it's been so many months. It's been so many months. And it's like, again, I can't. There's over a bajillion words in here, right? So I can't really complain. And I'm not complaining. It's like, underwrites at the speed that they write and all that sort of stuff. But God, I miss them. So I love YWDMP. Honestly, I'm gonna end up finishing my second reread. I'm gonna end up rereading it again, because I need my fill. But yeah. Anyways, thank you guys all for popping in to watch these streams. I always have a delightful time when I do. And yeah, you can check out. I mean, your idea for for kill the ones we love. So we don't kill the ones we love. check out acrylicmist is like currently writing some other fics that I've heard are very good. I haven't read them yet, but I plan to eventually. Oh my god, they have I think it's always funny when I find a Homestuck AO3 writer and I see any sort of Minecraft YouTube fic they've also written. It's always quite funny to me. The pipeline, it's true. But yeah, but acrylicmist does good work. I recommend them a lot. They do. I think they're an SBI fan. Very fair. Very fair. The SBI to Dave Cat pipeline, or the Dave Cat to SBI pipeline. All right. I will talk to you guys all next time, whenever next time is. I have to go plan a D&D session because I was supposed to do that tonight and I didn't. They have a heist mission tomorrow. They're heisting a manor, not a museum, and I have to plan that out. And I haven't done anything. So, bye-bye. Have a lovely night, y'all. Good night.